Hello, welcome to Food and Climate. Today we are going to talk with Janine Keeffe, who is a very prominent climate activist living in Sweden but coming from Australia. First, Janine, I would like that you tell me just shortly what kind of organizations are you working in and what are you doing basically?
Hi, Stefan. Nice to talk to you. Thank you for the invitation today. Okay, so what organizations am I working in? I've worked in Klimatriksdagen, which is climate parliament, Klimat action, eller Klimataktion, which is climate action, and then Klimat Sverige, which is like for the whole of Sweden, in a similar way. On top of this, Fridays for Future I've worked with quite a long time, especially with the map globally. And even supporting School Strike for Climate. On top of this, I've worked with Scientist Rebellion, Extinction Rebellion, Mothers Rebellion. Also, more traditionally, 350. Today, not so much with 350, but have for a long time done voluntary actions with them, and even Greenpeace.
Okay, and one could say that you are a typical starter. You are mobilizing and starting up processes that generates a lot of attention. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that would be fair, but also I think most of my work is about accelerating the voice of the local group by lifting that up and making a show globally. For example, on the map we have right now, I think it's close to 900 events just for the 15th of September, and we have over 500 events for the 22nd of September. So this is becoming a massive wave of climate action just in September.
Okay, so before we go to a few questions I have for you, can you tell me a little bit about what will happen the 15th of September and 22nd of September, and how can people be part of it?
Okay, so on the 15th of September, it's mainly Fridays for Future, but also together with Fight for Fossil Fuels to actually lift the climate activism again. And that's in coincidence with the summit in New York, the climate summit in New York, which is starting actually, I believe, on the Monday, so on the 18th. So there'll be a big summit, a big climate march on the 17th in New York. So to actually join these actions, you can go to fridaysforfuture.org/map and see what's already planned, and then join any one of those actions. Or else you can also yourself register if you have something locally happening, like you can't make the big trek into a big city. So that would be fridaysforfuture.org/register, just the word register, REGISTER, to set up your own action, be it one person or be it several people. On top of this, those links are also the same for the 22nd, but many places who chose not to be part of the 15th because it wasn't time, it didn't fit with them time-wise, they've joined on the 22nd. And for example, in the Mothers Rebellion is doing, I think they are now in 24 countries with 67 actions across the world, and most of them are on the Saturday, 23rd of September.
Okay, so if you see this or hear this and you live somewhere in the world on the 15th and 20 or 22nd of September, and you want to make a difference, you can either join one of these manifestations, but you could also, if you live in a smaller place, for example, and don't have time or don't possibility to go to the bigger events, you can actually have your own event. You write it in the map and you call your local newspaper and say, we have Fridays for Future manifestation here. In smaller places, this is news, this is local news. So please do that.
Absolutely. And in fact, you might find that the local newspaper will say, yeah, that's just weird. It's just one place. It's not global. So use the map to then point for the journalist that, there's hundreds of actions happening around the world. And actually on the map, the journalists can often find the email address for the activist. Say, for example, if you're doing an activity from Linköping in Sweden, then you can point for the journalist to go look at the email address for a person in France, somebody in the US, somebody in Korea, and suddenly they can actually do an article which is global. That often means that the article will get up past the editor.
Wow, great. And if you want to hear what Janine said, again, you just repeat it so you have a good instruction what to do, okay? So, Janine, I have my first question to you when it comes to the climate crisis and the climate catastrophe. I think both words are adequate. We are in both right now, and the world has warmed 1.2 degrees since the start of the Industrial Revolution. So we are aggravating CO2. Why is 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming an important or critical threshold?
It's actually quite interesting what's happening with the understanding of tipping points. And this work has been largely done by Johan Rockström, who's a Swede, so fairly close to you and I, Stefan. And he's now working in Berlin, continuing this work with many, many scientists. Now, these tipping points are clearly showing, and they're actually even showing a cascading effect. So originally when the work was done in August 2018, the understanding was that the tipping points would start somewhere between 1.5 and 2 degrees. Just in the last year, it's been very clear that 5 of them can start before 1.5 degrees. And there's no longer there used to be just 9 of them, and now there's about 15 to maybe even, including the more minor ones, probably 80 or 100. So having 5 of them start around or just before 1.5 degrees is extremely scary, because basically we're talking about like a COVID syndrome. Once you have one of these tipping points kick in, and we're already seeing them, you'll see that it's like COVID. Instead of actually having a linear effect, you can actually see that it doubles COVID doubled every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. In this case, it's possibly doubling every couple of months, maybe a year or 2. And that is really serious, because once that acceleration begins, that is far harder to stop.
Yes. Okay. And but still, what should we can add that every kilo or ton of CO2 counts. So we must emit as little as possible and starting right now.
Absolutely. But we need to also be careful that we're not just focusing on purely consumption.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, many people who focus on consumption feel guilty and
Yes.
won't then use
Yes, we need political decisions. For a moment,
their
Janine,
citizen voice to
Janine,
change the politics that we're living in.
please go back 10 seconds because we lost connection with you.
Okay. So while it's very important with every ton,
Yes.
and every 100 ton, etc., of carbon dioxide, voice and speak truth to power.
Yes.
Because while you and I are emitting many tons, possibly 1 or 2 tons a year, maybe 5, and most of that is because of our society deciding to emit by the health system, the school system, and many systems around us.
Yes, and the energy system and the food system.
Exactly, energy and food system. The very, very serious situation is that we have people emitting hundreds of tons, if not even 1,000 tons, with private jets. And
Yes.
these people are coupled into the fossil fuel systems.
Yes.
And it's only 70 companies which decide 90% of emissions.
Yes. So one could say like this, that the most important to turn this around is not individual action, but it's important too. The most important is political action, that they're taking decisions in the parliaments, in the European Parliament, in the big corporation boards, and of course these very rich people who emit so much. So it's many things, but you should not totally count out the personal. If you stop eating meat or stop flying, that has an impact. But the big difference, the big change will not come from there. It's an important part, but the most important path is what you're doing to create political momentum to change it. That's why we're talking now, today.
Absolutely.
So I will go mention the United Nations General Secretary, Antonio Guterres, who has used surprisingly straight and blunt language when he's talking about the climate crisis and the climate catastrophe. Why? What is he saying and why?
Okay, first, most recent comment is he's talking about us being in global boiling and no longer global warming. And you can see that with the oceans, with the warming temperatures. And this last summer, you can actually see that we've approximately doubled temperature just in the last year relative to the last 15 to 20 years.
Yes.
So that's a very good example of this acceleration of tipping points that we're talking about.
Yep.
We're not going to be sure that we're in a tipping point until afterward. Like we measure it from with the rear view mirror. So you can't actually be certain you're there until afterward. But once you're there, it's so impossible to leave. It makes it's extremely dangerous. And once again, Johan Rockström, he says that 1.5, staying under 1.5 degrees can save billions of lives. We're not talking about millions of lives anymore. We're talking about billions.
We're playing roulette with the future, simply.
Yes, absolutely. And this is unfair, completely and utterly unfair, both from a generational viewpoint that you and I, or really people since the 1856 could know that that we were on the way to global boiling and climate breakdown. 1856 were the first models produced by Eunice Newton Foote. Okay, now that science was then backed up by the fossil fuel industry in 1958, 100 years later. So before probably you and I were born, we were certain this was going to happen. And yet it hasn't been understood. Many people still don't know. And now that we're in the brink of racing towards disaster, as like the feeling that in 2018, the scientists were saying it was somewhere between 1.5 and 2 for tipping points, and now it's before 1.5, means that we're not just racing towards the disaster, the science is teaching us that the disaster is closer than we thought.
Okay, so you have explained what will happen the 15th and 22nd of September, which is basically more mainstream manifestations to put pressure on the political system to act, and all actors in the society to act. But you also part of a movement that use peaceful civil obedience in the struggle to save the world. Why is that?
Okay, so what we saw in 2018 and 2019 with Fridays for Future was 66% of people. It was originally around 2% before 2018, and then 2019, the UN record that 66% of the entire world population considered that we were in climate emergency. And did much happen? So some politics were changed in the EU. Some politics were changed. Definitely Uruguay, New Zealand, and even Denmark stepped up. But Sweden?
Let me give credit to this movement. For example, among other things, the election to European Parliament in May 2019. It was definitely affected. You got more politicians working for this, and in the next step, sharpened, I think, the decisions they took in the European Union the coming years. So we should give a great credit to this movement to actually have made a difference.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I think you're correct. But I also, like, if we look at Sweden, how much was changed? And even if I'm Australian by birth, and I saw the disastrous fires of 2019 to 2020, how much changed? I would say trivial.
Yes, that's right.
And this is revolting, absolutely revolting, because those fires, I don't know if you know, but those fires spread now at a rate of up to 250 kilometers an hour. A fire front, instead of being 10 meters wide or maybe 100 meters wide, could be kilometers wide. The fire used to be, it was classified as a fire if it was like half a meter high or a meter high. And now sometimes it's a wall of fire which is 10 meters high. So
yes,
if you talk to the firemen, all they say, all you can do is just evacuate.
Yes.
You don't have a hope. And these fires need to burn down to the sea. That's what happened. That's what I understand happened in Hawaii with 100 people dying, or maybe it's even 200, just in 24 hours.
Yes.
It's just revolting that they were not warned. And equally so, when Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion and other organizations lifted the understanding of climate emergency from 2% to 66%, the chance was there for every politician to step up. Did they step up? Some of them did, but not many. So therefore, we have to look at what created democracy. What were the tools which were used to bring democracy to us? And it was used not just in democracy, it was used for the printing press, it was used for freedom of religion, so freedom of speech and printing. Even it was used commonly for suffragette, women's vote, and civil rights, the black vote, and even gay rights. What was the mechanisms used there? It was civil disobedience.
So you mean peaceful civil obedience was a necessary part for all these changes you mentioned now?
Yeah. If you look at historically how they came about, I'm not saying it was the only mechanism, but it was a key mechanism, and it could not, using just, for suffragettes, they went for, I think, 30 or 40 years trying very, using the institutions, going through constitutional methods, using very many methods. And then in the last 5 to 10 years, they used civil disobedience. And that was the key which brought the change. So I would say it's a collection of these methods together, because you need to have public opinion. So Fridays for Future, who effectively changed from 2% to 66% awareness with Extinction Rebellion, that is key. But on the other side, you also need to show to the politicians that we're not going to let you just ignore us.
Yes.
And that's where civil disobedience is often key.
And can you then tell me a little about the climate justice activist movement here in Sweden? So especially those listening here in Sweden, what they can do, what they can contact.
So with this, during the from the 15th to the 22nd, there's actually a sort of large Swedish collection of many organizations called Week of Action. So you can actually register your action there, and then it will go on the Facebook page and their web page, and it will also we're happily, also putting them on Fridays for Future. So you can once again go to fridaysforfuture.org/map and register there, as well as fridaysforfuture.org/register to register there. So effectively, during the week of action, many civil disobedient organizations are also stepping up. So Scientist Rebellion will have an action. I think there's Bank Rebellion. I think there's Myndighet Rebellion or Institutional Rebellion. Oh yes, and there's also Pension Rebellion, or it's actually maybe they're not using the word rebellion. And I think there's also Teacher Rebellion. There may be several others. I don't know them all. Many of these will use civil disobedience.
And how do people find them?
Once again, many of them are on the map and on Facebook and on Week of Action.
Okay.
So people should be able to find them. Direct contact to individuals involved is also a common method, but definitely Week of Action Facebook page is working hard to try and keep every one of them up there.
Okay, and if you see this interview on YouTube, you can also, if you don't have so much time to look things up, write your email and someone will contact you. That's okay? Now, Janine.
And you can also write my email there, which is just...
Yes, you will see the email down here, the address to Janine. Okay, Janine, we go to the, just to sum things up. There are a lot of things that people can actually do to make a difference. So, to repeat, if you want to make a difference, the most obvious thing to do always is vote. Even if you think most politicians are inefficient, they don't care enough about this, there are still differences between the parties and the politicians. So try to select the best political party when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis, and just what your analysis of what to vote for could be any color of that party. The important thing is that you really look it up and vote for the climate, not for conservatism or liberalism or something. You just vote for the climate. And the second thing is to write letter to the editors, or insändare in Swedish. It's very easy to do. They take it in, write something that you are angry or that you demand action. And Janine has told us about different kind of manifestations, Fridays for Future or Extension Rebellion, for example, or different kinds of other civil obedience movements. Something you want to add to that?
I think it's really important when we talk about civil disobedience to know what the UN is saying. So, for example, 50 people, there's over 50 people charged with sabotage now here in Sweden for civil disobedience. I'm one. And yet the UN is quite different in their view on this. They think climate justice activists shall be just asked, never be charged, never be sent to jail, never be charged with sabotage, never be charged with treason, and never be charged with sedition, and just be given work on climate, because they see the climate is that important. So I think it's important to mention that the UN is very clear about that requirement and would prefer to see climate justice activists given work to teach in schools about the climate breakdown, rather than being treated as if they're terrorists, which is completely and utterly wrong.
Okay, Janine, to end this very good conversation, what kind of hope can we still have to help us in the fight? Because we must have hope also, not just gloom in the future.
We have each other, and I think that's important. And I think our communities together are far stronger if we listen to the science. And one example of the recent science which has come out, not just to restore the wetlands or to ställa vårt marker, but also, I don't know if you read, but in the US, they've actually done what is called stone fencing or stone collections. Okay, so they put stones in the river and slow down the water. And slowing down of that water actually means that the entire river system becomes like a wetland, återställa vårt mark. And that actually does a massive amount of drawdown in comparison to where the old rivers were flooding very fast. These rivers now flood, or they flow far slower, and that slower flow leads to a far greater drawdown. We need to understand that. And the truth is, we haven't really started looking at really good mechanisms. We've just been focusing that, okay, it'll be the engineering that does it. You know, we'll be able to use infångare, and we'll be able to use, what's it called? Carbon dioxide capture.
Yes.
And they may work, but they're not as nearly as effective as some of the natural systems. And we haven't really let our natural scientists get into these processes and be well and truly supported by our society. I think that's very important.
But I would still say that we now see a very rapid exponential growth of wind power and solar energy and battery, and to store the electricity. Those are totally important parts. And we see now in the United States, European Union, China, many countries, a lot of things happening. But it's not enough. We need more and stronger political action. So there is some glimmer of hope, but there are also desperate need for action.
Absolutely. And even, for example, with storage, look at the Swedish water. We rely basically on water power here in Sweden, and they're actually a form of storage of power. And then we can use local water storage as well. So storage doesn't have to just be batteries. No. We can be more open with our ideas and be more, what I would say, inventive. And that's what's happening now. You're seeing the actual breakdown of this belief that it's just the old ways. And that's important for us to rethink and find new ways together, especially local community resilience, which wind power is the perfect option for.
Yes. Okay, Janine, thank you so much. I would like to say to you who listened or saw this, that please subscribe on YouTube and follow on podcasts, and also like this video if you like it. And I would also ask you once more to tell where to go to register for these two manifestations during September. So we had that as a final point.
Okay, so it's fridaysforfuture.org, O-R-G, then /register, just the word R-E-G-I-S-T-E-R, to register, and then to find something would be fridaysforfuture.org/map. They're the easiest methods.
Okay, so see you around during these events. Very important. And thank you, Janine, again.
Thank you.
And thank you who listened and saw this. We'll be back next week with another interview. So thank you for listening to us.